On the 23rd of November 1963, the day after the assassination of JFK, the BBC first broadcast sci-fi series Doctor Who. And on this edition of the Mouthcast, a writer-performer responsible for one-man shows Moths Ate My Doctor Who Scarf and, more recently, My Stepson Stole My Sonic Screwdriver, Toby Haydoke. Welcome to the Mouthcast.
Thank you for having me.
Of course, as if this year wasn't big enough because of the anniversary, there's been the recent news that Peter Capaldi is about to take over the title role.
When he was rumoured, I just thought, oh, that's just a genius idea. It's such a genius idea. It's far too good to be true. And it was him. And I am still, listen to me, I'm thrilled. I cannot wait. I'm so excited. Peter Capaldi, I mean, he's a fantastic actor. The fact that he's a fan is aside and irrespective, but that's great as well. But it's Peter Capaldi. He's a fabulous actor. I have to say, I now rue the fact that having spent much of my recent life living in Crouch End and almost tripping over him on the way to Tesco's, I never availed myself of the opportunity to become his best friend.
Ladies and gentlemen, festive greetings from all at the Mouth magazine.
David Callahan of The Wolf House.
That's me.
Cut the Cake, your debut single actually, is on Scared to Get Happy.
It was like the second demo I ever gave out. The Pink label basically rang up 2 nights later about 2 in the morning and said, do you want to make a record? So
2 in the morning?
Yeah. Well, I was still living with my mum then, and like, she was like, who's that ringing at bloody 2 in the morning? Yeah? I'm finding it a good time to be in a group. I think the actual music scene is like appalling, worse than ever. Nearly, I can't think of any genre that's healthy. I know it's harder now. It's harder to be on the dole and just be a musician and hang around and do stuff. But that never stopped Americans, you know. It shouldn't stop Brits, really. They should be being a bit more, you know. Poverty's always been the lot of a musician, you know. So they should. Maybe I'm missing something. I haven't seen anything, but everything seems in awe of what's gone before. And you should be influenced by Joy Division or whatever, but fucking show it some disrespect as well, you know? Be energetic and rude with it, you know? That's what they should be doing, you know? In my opinion.
David Woodward, Brilliant Corners.
This is the first gig we've done in over 20 years. It was just really, really nice to sort of see so many people enjoying themselves and to play those songs live after such a long time. I really, really enjoyed tonight.
And as you said, on stage, really poignant to play Teenage.
Yeah. It's kind of weird. Part of me thought, you know, an old guy playing a song called Teenage, but when I kind of sang the lyrics, actually a lot of those sort of feelings still resonate. A lot of feelings when you're a youth, when you're going through troubled adolescence, they stay with you forever. Little tiny bits of it stay with you forever, and you know, I was quite happy to sing that song tonight.
Hugh McGuinness, Mighty Mighty, you famously said that about the Smiths, that they write 2-minute pop songs and we write 3-minute pop songs.
Yeah, that's the most ridiculous thing I've ever said in my life. It haunts me to this day, that quote. Because I sing a little, I think I have a Morrissey-esque croon, according to a lot of people, and the Smiths were some of my favourite bands. Sorry, I don't even know what that I don't even know what the quote means. What's it mean?
Derek Hammond, yeah, no.
You know, we stood out really in that we were, kind of slightly shambolic and we didn't stand out in that we were shambolic. It's just that, you know, we could hardly play, but we were trying to write concept albums, hence the sort of bedsit psychedelia, you know, sort of extremely low budget is that's the kind of tack that he was taking. So yes, we've got a bit more oomph actually these days. You may be surprised to hear
something entirely beyond them.
Hey, listening to the Mouthcast live and direct from a tour van. The tour van belongs to a band who are teaching the lessons of the past through the music of the future. That's public service broadcasting, namely J. Wilgoose Esquire.
Hello.
And Wrigglesworth.
Hello.
Hopefully then, never-ending archive of BFI stuff for you, and perhaps the BBC will open up their gates, as you say.
It's the sort of thing you never know. If we get sort of a higher profile and get a bit better known, people might start approaching with specific topics and specific things in mind, and you know, want to ask us to do things. So yeah, you never know. Be good. That'd be good. But the BFI, in the meantime, are a fantastic source for us, and there's all sorts of other stuff on the boil, really. Sort of planning what's next. So
let's round up by asking that, what is next?
I don't like to talk about that. I'll just remain cryptic and say it should be good. Yeah, I'll try my best.
It's tiring, always stretching after something that's just out of reach.
You're listening to the Mouthcast, live and direct from the NCEM, that's the National Centre for Early Music, situated in York. Most unusual venue, rather beautiful actually, converted church. And my guest is singer-songwriter Tom McRae. Welcome to the Mouthcast, Tom.
Thank you.
Your parents were both vicars, actually.
They were, yes.
So I imagine you've seen the inside of a church or two in your time.
I have probably seen the inside of most churches in Europe, to be honest. Yeah, it was not only my everyday life as a child up until I was in my early teens, but also every family holiday was traipsing around the cathedrals and parish churches of southern Europe. And I know my way around a vestry and a nave and an aisle and a font, and I'm very familiar.
Okay, listening to the Mouthcast, and the guest on this edition is a man who, since 1986, has fronted his band through almost as many lineup changes as The Fall, a band that Kurt Cobain once claimed he'd join if he weren't in Nirvana. Douglas T. Stewart of BMX Bandits, welcome to the Mouthcast.
Hello, it's lovely to be here.
Douglas, we spoke briefly at the Scared to Get Happy gig a couple of weeks ago, chatted about the first single, double A-side, E102 and Sad, which was reviewed as one of the worst records of all time by Sound.
Possibly the worst record ever made, Sounds reckoned. And BMX Bandits are still here, and Sounds has been long defunct, so that kind of feels good.
You're listening to the Mouthcast, and the guests on this edition are stalwarts of the Manchester music scene, currently working together under the name Pile of Flames. Paul Arthurs, aka Bonehead, formerly of Oasis, and solo artist Vinnie Peculiar, once memorably described as the Tony Hancock of pop. Gentlemen, welcome to the Mouthcast.
Good to be here.
Hello.
The personal chemistry as well as the musical is clearly important. Bonehead, what was it about Vinnie's work that made you want to collaborate with him?
Lyrics just struck me. I hadn't heard anyone in a long time, probably since Morrissey, I think. Produced something lyrically that affected me in that way. Normally I sort of listen to lyrics and they just pass me by, so that's a great tune, but it's not to put Noel Gallagher down, but there's only so many Jaguars, cars, sunshines and stuff you can write about. But Vinnie's lyrics were very immediate with me, so that's what really struck me about his music, really.
Listening to the Mouthcast, the 40th edition of the Mouthcast as it happens. It's an absolute pleasure to welcome John Power.
Thank you very much. Cheers.
We're in your hotel room.
Yes.
You're on a bit of a mini acoustic solo tour.
Yeah, I'm going with no man with an acoustic has gone before tour.
Before we talk about your solo ventures, I'll take you back to Liverpool.
Aye.
When you were 18 years old,
yeah.
And it's a bit like This Is Your Life.
It's a bit like that, isn't it?
Here he is, Mr. Lee Mays. So you were 18 and you joined the Lars. You were the bass player in the Lars for about 5 years.
Yeah, it seemed like longer than that. I mean, it was probably such an important part of my life that it's like a kind of childhood. It feels, at the time, it's only when I look back, when I was a bit older, that I think, oh God, it was only maybe 5.5 years. But it felt long, it felt like a chapter, It's like looking back at early childhood as well. You kind of... as you get older, time goes faster, doesn't it? But yeah, it was a good, good important part of my life. That
bassist in Bob Geldof's solo band, And from the recently reformed Boomtown Rats, Pete Briquette.
I mean, Live Aid took over, really. And Live Aid took over, and the Boomtown Rats were struggling anyway. I mean, I won't deny that. We did do a very good album, but it was pushed to one side because there was a much more important event that was happening. And I probably would have been pissed off, but because of the significance of what it was and because of the importance of Live Aid and what has happened, I said, fine, if we get pushed to one side, it's for a very, very good reason.
Dylan Jones, author of The 80s, One Day, One Decade. Welcome to the Mouthcast.
Hello there, how you doing?
I was awake almost all night last night, actually, reading and rereading passages from the book. It's really beautifully written. Any book which describes status quo as British as HP sauce, an errant royal or a disco headbutt is all right by me.
Thank you very much.
And here now is the band that's led by the man who was the spark, Bob Geldof and the Boomtown Rats.
And right at the centre of events was this intense, divisive character, Geldof, obsessive, driven, hectoring. His modus operandi in pulling both Live Aid and the Band Aid single together belies incredible determination, lots of double bluffing and, frankly, a little bit of bullying. Your book gives lots of insight into the sheer force of his personality.
It could only have happened through Geldof's determination. He grandstands, he's opinionated, he's got a monstrous ego, etc., etc., etc. However, I think that the good far outweighs people's idea of what they think the bad is.
I've just realised today is the best day in my life.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Mouthcast.
You're listening to the Mouthcast, live from the churchyard of the Unitarian Church, actually, round the corner from a venue in York, where tonight, on a very hot day, two of the coolest names from the mid-90s, the nicest names as well, are playing a gig. Sonia Aurora Madan and Glenn Johansson, once of Echo Belly, now of Calm of Zero, but sort of Echo Belly again. Welcome to the Mouthcast.
Hello.
Thank you. And your gigs back in the day, I remember them being really exuberant. I actually remember standing at the back and seeing all these heads bobbing up and down, and then a pair of feet in the midst of all this. So whoever it was actually upside down. So what was that kind of thing like for you to see all that, the effect that you would have on people?
It was very exciting, especially in the early days when we played kind of smaller places, because it used to be so rammed. And it used to be very chaotic. Everything, even on stage, everything was just chaotic. You had people falling up on stage and people getting crushed, and it was just a bit crazy and just chaos, really, and slightly uncomfortable in that sense. I wouldn't want to do that now, but it was very exciting,
I remember one place, the ceiling actually collapsed in the middle of the show,
right?
And it was like something from Spinal Tap, and we just carried on playing, covered in dust and debris, and it just carried on. But we did get banned from a few places for being too noisy and too many punch-ups. So, not the band, but the audience. So.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Mouthcast.
Guest on this edition is the man who fronted the Soup Dragons between 1985 and 95, Sean Dixon. Welcome to the Mouthcast.
Hi, how you doing?
Well, I guess there's no one to blame, 'cause we're in this situation all together. Your attitude always changes like the weather. And I guess it must be true. All the things I ever said about you could have been nobody else. The only person blame is myself.
Hang 10 was the first in a run of 4 incredible singles, followed by Head Gone Astray, Can't Take No More, and Soft As Your Face. I was working in a record shop at the time, and I remember having this kind of book running on the double groove version of Soft As Your Face. We'd put 10p each into a kitty, put the needle to the vinyl, and depending on which groove the needle picked up, you'd get one song or the other. So obviously we were never sure what we were going to get.
Which is kind of our sense of humour, because I read somewhere that some cutting engineer in London used to do these records that had like 4 or 5 or 6 grooves that were for racing records back in the 60s, and you'd buy the LP and you'd listen to like a horse race or a greyhound race, I don't know what it was, and every time you listened to it there was a different winner. He kind of thought, I wonder if he's still around, and I found him, as a 60-year-old guy or something, and I said, I want to cut 2 records in between each other, so every time they play it they get, if I remember right, I think it was the live version of Soft As Your Face in between Soft As Your Face, or was it Can't Take No More? No, it's Can't Take No More, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's this little, it's dub version of Can't Take No More with just drums, isn't it? Well, you should know this, Paul.
I was happy to hear whatever came up either way, to be honest. On the other end of this telephone is frontman of the Wonder Stuff, Miles Hunt. Welcome to the Mouthcast, Miles.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here.
Your single with Vic and Bob,
yeah,
Dizzy. Personally, I'm not a huge fan of comedy records or records
right.
with comedians involved. But of course, people forget Vic Reeves doesn't just have that club singer voice, he can really sing. Like
oh, yeah.
Mr. Songwriter, I've always thought is the great lost Elvis ballad, really. So Dizzy was actually a really great record. Huge crossover appeal. The sense of humour thing there again, enormously so. Great video, a lot of fun. How did you find it holding your own against those guys?
Well, they're both adorable. I haven't seen much of Bob in recent years, but I see Jim all the time, or Vic, and we've always stayed in contact. In the late 90s, I was even living with Vic down in Kent.
Right.
But at that time, they hadn't sort of gone mainstream, and they were very much still making most of the country scratch their head. You just watch something like The Big Night Out, and some of us got it straight away. Other people were just like, what in God's name is this? I don't even know what it's meant to be. So, it wasn't like, we just jumped into a studio with somebody famous, just because they were famous. It was, these guys are really intriguing, It was a good time, yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, immigrants, emigrants, and the Mouthcast.
Oh, you're listening to the Mouthcast, and on this edition, a man who is now 1/4 of Irish-French electro-pop band Mineral, signed to Alan McGee's 359, but was formerly frontman of a Dublin-based indie rock band responsible for one of the most highly regarded Irish debut albums of all time. That was Immigrants, Emigrants and Me. The band was Power of Dreams, and the man is Craig Walker. Welcome to the Mouthcast, Craig.
Hi, Steve. Nice to be here. After that was the Smiths, and they were really my band, to be honest. I mean, I got into them through my brother, and I remember him playing me the first single and just being transfixed by this band immediately. And I still think the Four Smiths album is really just something amazing, kind of eerie in a way, It was,
although the later records are kind of definitively what you could say with the Smiths.
Yeah.
That first record doesn't sound, I don't think, like any of the albums that came afterwards, but it still also sounds only like the Smiths.
That's the beauty of the Smiths, really. They didn't really sound like anything else. I remember being such a fan of the Smiths that I was trying to find other bands similar, and you'd get into bands like the Wooden Tops or James but they never sounded like the Smiths, I mean, even the Wedding Present, I remember the first Wedding Present album was kind of a little bit like the Smiths, but that was enough to go on, The Four Smiths album is really of its, even within the Smiths canon, it's a standalone record. I think it's a really underrated album. And it's so northern England, it really encapsulates all of that, like romance and, like for me, growing up in Dublin, it was a romantic thing about Manchester, and Busby Babes and the team, and there's a huge following here, and George Best playing for Manchester, and Manchester's always held a fascination, I think, and they have rain, just like we have, lots of it.
I'm Dr. John Cooper Clarke, and you're listening to the Mouthcast.
John, welcome to the Mouthcast.
Hello. But I've never really got any mileage out of being part of any of those, Manchester-centric kind of scenes, I mean, I've always seen myself as a citizen of the world, I've been, ever since I first got married. In fact, since I was 18. The first time I ever lived away from Manchester was when I was 18. Ever since then, I've been in and out of the place all my life, so I'm not like, I ain't like that. I'm not kind of gung-ho and nationalistic about Manchester, not by any fucking means. Honest to God. But the only reason I'm saying that is because I don't feel I can claim any of that as mine, because I didn't capitalise on it. So to be pigeonholed into that sort of whole Manchester, to be seen as part of any Manchester scene. Really, when it comes to mythologising Manchester, the guy for that, the magic realist of Manchester, really, is you're looking at one guy only, Mark Smith. He made Manchester a worldwide fetish because his lyrics were very arcane. It's not like folk music, what Smithy does, it's arcane. It's like what Marquez does for Colombia, South America somewhere, some small town. He's made it a fucking magic place, there's people from all over the world go to that place, and Smithy, and to a lesser extent, well, probably to a greater extent, because he had more commercial success, Mozza. They sort of turned Manchester into this sort of real... And it's there, they're not painting a picture that isn't there, just tweaking it up to the max.
My mum says that the spring is in the air, and everyone's at it, they're at it like rabbits.
On this edition, Luke Haines. I mentioned Rock and Roll Animals as a concept album, as an art form, if that doesn't sound too pretentious.
No, you mustn't fear art. Art's good for you, It's not a thing to be feared. That's a bourgeois kind of conceit that art is a thing to be feared. Art can be done by anybody. Doesn't necessarily have to be for everybody. The man on the street doesn't have to understand it or whatever. But there should be no fear of it. That's the old thing that they taught them all at Goldsmiths, the YBAs. That you must always put out this question: but is it art? And therefore outrage the man on the street who doesn't really care anyway. There's nothing to be afraid of. We must call it art if it is art.
But the man on the street may be afraid of the concept album, is what I mean. It's an art form that's not really been on anyone's agenda for what seems quite a long time.
Well, fuck the man on the street, I don't care. Sid Vicious was right, with his famous Sid Vicious quote. I think it was the only good thing he ever said was, "I've met the man on the street, he's a cunt." So he was right,
But speaking to us today on the telephone from Sidmouth, where she played last night, Eliza Carthy. Eliza, welcome to the Mouthcast.
Hello, how are you?
Going back to around the time of the Dreams of Breathing Underwater album, so about 5 years ago, you had quite a few problems with your voice. You even had to have surgery, and horror of horrors, you gave up smoking and drinking. God, but that was depressing.
Yeah, I've had surgery twice now, yeah.
Well, around that time, when you gave birth to the first of your two daughters, you underwent a silent birth.
I did.
Which sounds... I'm wincing thinking about it. It must have taken a superhuman amount of willpower.
Well, I mean, I didn't have any choice. There was no voice there to scream with, do you know what I mean? It just wasn't there. It just wasn't there. It left me because it just cast me out to sea with no map, with no compass. I had nothing.
I mean, that must have been absolutely terrifying, really.
It was terrifying, and I was very, very unhappy. Very unhappy for a long time. I'm over that now, but that was a very, very profound experience for me. I completely withdrew from everybody. I couldn't go into social situations and speak. I couldn't go to parties. I couldn't go to gigs. I couldn't laugh out loud. I couldn't, the walls were closing in for a very, very long time, and it was a very, very unhappy time for me.
You have your daughters with you, so I'm guessing you want to take them out to see the delights of Sidmouth.
Yeah, we're going for a cream tea.
Oh, excellent. I love a scone. Hope you all enjoy that.
Yeah, will do.
Speaking to the Mouth magazine today in his former capacity as head of an enormously influential label which features heavily on Scared to Get Happy. That's Creation Records, as if you didn't know. It's an honour to welcome the legendary Alan McGee to the Mouthcast.
I went to see Neil Young the other night, and that was fucking phenomenal, man. It's just like gig of the decade, basically. It's the best I've seen him since about 87, which is the first time I ever saw him. But Neil Young, what's amazing about Neil Young was he was 70 years old, and he played 7 new songs that nobody in the audience, 16,000 people in Birmingham, nobody knew any of the songs he was playing for the first 7 songs. Then he played, like, Heart of Gold. It was amazing! And he's 70 and he's still not playing the game. And that really puts something like the Rolling Stones in perspective. It's like, the Rolling Stones are cabaret, literally. And I like the Stones, but it's cabaret compared to Neil Young. Neil Young was like, it was like punk rock, except punk rock by a 70-year-old guy that could really play. You see his pictures of the Stones, fucking show business, man. Do you know what I mean? Fuck off. Do you know what? I mean, even at 52, it made me go, God, is it too late for me?
Well, you never know, Alan. You might be there at 70 years old, rooting out new bands and signing them and doing the odd Biff Bang Pow gig.
No, come on, Steve. I mean, don't think you could get a lot of us on stage now, you know. I mean, I think we're just a bunch of old fucking smelly posters. I wouldn't worry about that, you know.
David Bowie draws together over 300 costumes, props, pieces of artwork and instruments from the artist's extensive personal archive, which stretches back to cover his 45 plus years in music. The Mouth magazine's been invited for a sneak preview, so let's begin this edition of the Mouthcast by talking to Geoffrey Marsh about the difficulties and I'm sure absolute joys of pulling together a landmark event such as David Bowie is.
And I think at some level, he's come this sort of, he's almost like a kind of prehistoric shaman. People construct these images of the modern world. You know, we live in this sort of, particularly in the West, we're all reasonably well off. I mean, I know there's lots of poverty in places, but, you know, on average. But people kind of, what does it all mean? And I think they come up with what they construct and then they project it onto Bowie, and that becomes their view of the world. And it's a very sort of strange thing. I hope we give it at least some clue to, but quite what that magic thing was right at the start, which set it all off, I think people will be guessing about that. And unless Bowie decides to say something himself, I don't think we'll ever be quite sure. And if he does say something, I'm sure he'd probably have made it up anyway.
Jerry Leonard, it's afternoon here in the UK, but good morning to you in Washington, DC, and welcome to the Mouthcast.
Cheers, Steve. It's nice to be talking to you. My job, I'm here with the guitar. I got to back this up, you know? So it was really fun. It was really fun. It was really exciting.
And it's a really broad-sounding record as well. There's a coherence to it.
Yeah.
I think it contributes greatly to his body of work. He must be incredibly pleased with it, and as a band, you must all be delighted with it.
Yeah. I got a little tiny email from him yesterday, and it just says that he's proud. And we all are, you know. I felt like he definitely felt like he was exploring roots in a way, things that influenced him in his writing over the years, you know. But once it goes to the Bowie thing, it becomes very much David's thing, and it's so full of his personality. But, you know, some of the initial kind of like grooves and song structures and song types, I think, maybe come from some of his R&B and blues roots and, you know, the things that gets him excited about music. But there's always a real physical side to it. Even if you're doing an atmospheric track with David, there's a physical side to the process and the playing, you know.
Jerry, thanks very much for your time and for telling us about your work with David Bowie. And congratulations on the album. I think it's safe to say it's going to do really well and will come to be regarded as a classic. What's next for you? I have my fingers crossed here that you're going to have a bit of an oops moment and let slip that you booked up for a year for a Bowie tour.
Well, you know, I could tell you that, Steve, but I'd have to kill you then, you know. But maybe you'd die happy.
The Mouth magazine will return in 2014.